Good morning and welcome to the NEI Hansen webcast. I'm Kristen Jost, your moderator. I would like to welcome our hosts, Mike Walters, Executive Managing Director, and Jonathan Kristovich, Associate Director of Capital Markets. And we welcome Francis Reiner, Principal and Redevelopment Consultant of DMR Architects. Today's discussion will be on the redevelopment in Hackensack. Thank you for joining us, and I will now turn the call over to Mike.
Excellent. Thank you, Kristen. I'd really like to thank you for your hard work, all your efforts, and I'm excited. This is going to be a great program. I'd also like to thank Fran, who I'm going to call our star guest, the principal and planning from DMR. Also acknowledge my longtime relationship with Lloyd Rosenberg, president of DMR. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Lloyd is always in the background. And as far as Fran is my go-to guy for anything Hackensack. First off, I'd like to acknowledge COVID-19. I hope everyone is well and healthy, and our thoughts and prayers to those who have lost family and friends. On to Hackensack. James E. Hansen, Inc. has a storied past going back 50 years in Hackensack, and up until July of 2018, I have spent my entire professional career in Hackensack, as well as lived in Hackensack in various apartments over the years. Most important, let's hand the ball over to John. And John, you can tell us what we have in store for us today.
Great, thanks, Mike. Really appreciate it, and welcome everyone. And thank you for coming to hear us chat with Fran Reiner about Hackensack today. Hackensack is the Bergen County seat. It's home to the largest employers in the county, Hackensack Meridian Health, and the county administration offices. It is the center of everything. I mean, it's bounded by highways that provide access throughout the state into New York City, and also has 2 transit stations and bus that provide access to the city. It's a really dynamic city. It's called the City in Motion, which has been living up to the name for sure. There's been a tremendous amount of development activity, and we're going to provide you with some great real-time information today about current projects going on in the marketplace, but most importantly, what we're looking forward to is hearing what Fran has to say about the future. Fran, I'll throw it over to you.
Sure, thank you. So I appreciate it. I just want to thank the NIA Hansen team. I want to thank you and Mike and Kristen for allowing me to participate in this today. I appreciate it. I'm going to give just a very brief background on kind of where we came from in Hackensack and maybe where we are today, and hopefully where Hackensack is moving toward in the next decade or so. So I actually got involved with Hackensack back in 2008-9. We were a redevelopment consultant for the city, and back in 2012, we actually adopted what is known as the Downtown Rehabilitation Plan, which was essentially created new zoning for approximately 160 acres, 39 city blocks, and almost 400 individual residential properties. Since 2012, what has gone on from that point till today is that there have been approximately 30 redevelopment plans that are individual projects that have been adopted and approved within the city. There are about 15 of them that are under construction, representing approximately 2,500 residential units. You can see in this map some of the projects and their locations, some of them under construction, some of them in the approval process. There are another 1,500 residential units that are in the planning process that have not been necessarily approved through the planning board yet, but are in the queue and are being considered and worked on by various developers. So in total, in the last 8 years, what we've seen is essentially 4,000 residential units in a 160-acre kind of area along Main Street, 30 different redevelopment projects, and I will say that there are projects that are continuing to be discussed and are kind of in the pipeline for the city and for the development community. In terms of where we are today, I think there are some interesting things that the city is moving forward with that I want to share with everyone. So the first being is that the city is converting Main Street back to two-way. As many of you know, State Street was one-way for more than 40 years. Main Street has started its conversion. The area between Essex Street and Atlantic Street has already been converted back to two-way. And the remaining portion of Main Street from Atlantic through Ward Street is intended to be converted back to two-way sometime this year. In addition to that conversion, the city is ongoing with its streetscape improvements. Those will continue through this year and probably into next year, and that includes new bollards and benches and lighting, street trees, and an enhanced street environment all the way from Essex all the way up through past the Sears site. So those are two things that the city's in the process of moving forward with from a construction standpoint. The city is also adopting and going to be adopting what's called a re-examination study. That should be happening in the next several months. It's a document that represents essentially what the goals, objectives, and vision are for the city of Hackensack for the next 10 years. So while the rehabilitation plan for the downtown really laid out what the city wanted to happen in its downtown from 2010 to 2020, the re-examination study will really identify and talk about what the city wants to do and what goals it wants to meet for the next 10 years, which is a critical piece for the city because it lays out what they want to see occur. And one of those things that we think is really paramount in that plan is that the city is looking to create a innovative life sciences biotech type of area around the Essex Street corridor, which would include the potential for job growth, and it would really create what we believe is a much more sustainable overall community. So where we have development going on, and we believe residential development will continue within the downtown over the course of the next 10 years, the city really is looking to figure out a way to support that residential development with high-tech, bio-life sciences types of jobs that would support the new residents, but also support the hospital. In addition, Bergen Community College was approved for the construction of a culinary school, which will be located on Berry Street. It's a very exciting project and represents an expansion of the university and college within the downtown. That just in general breathes life into downtown, so the city's very excited about that coming out of the ground. As I mentioned, there is a rock climbing facility that is under construction. In addition, the city is looking to move forward with Lot D. Lot D is located between Salem and Camden, between State and Main. It's on the block where the Wells Fargo building is. The city owns a very large piece of property in the middle of that block. And they're going to be looking for developers to construct both a mixed-use redevelopment project along Main Street, which would include a significant public parking structure component to support both residential at night, but also to support office workers during the day and retail uses in the daytime and early evening. In addition, Lot C, which if you're familiar with, is located between the Ice House and Fashini Park. That's going to start construction here in the next within the next year. It is intended to be a mixed-use project of approximately 380 some odd residential units. An important component of that project is that there is a 200 space public parking structure that would be built into the project as a part of the overall development. And so those are the things that are happening right now, and those are the kind of some of the interesting projects that'll be coming aboard within the city in the coming several years.
Wow, Fran, that's really great. You know, and I just want to assure the audience that I know that was a lot of information, but he's really just scratching the surface in that brief overview. There's a ton of detail there that we could talk about for hours, but Mike and I have some burning questions that we really want to ask Fran that, you know, through our travels in you know, listing and selling properties in downtown Hackensack that we hear all the time from, you know, owners, investors, and developers. So Mike, I'll throw it over to you. Want to take us out?
Yes, thanks, John. One of the first questions and discussions we have with interested parties is, boy, you guys have all this development, all these units. How is Hackensack going to absorb these units? And as a follow-up, Fran, how do you track demand and supply, which is a big deal?
So it's a question we are both asked, and it's a question that we actually ask developers as they come and talk to us about opportunities in Hackensack. There are a number of different reasons why we believe Hackensack, and we believe the development community believes Hackensack is so well situated to accept this type of growth. First and foremost, there have been a number of studies which have indicated the state of New Jersey has a significant deficiency in actual residential units that it needs, somewhere in the ballpark of 200 to 240,000 units across the state that are deficient. So that in and of itself shows that there is a need for the residential component. A couple other aspects that we think are really critical is the location of Hackensack is really in a premier location, both from the standpoint of its physical location, proximity to Route 80, 17, 4, the highways. There's 2 different train stations that are located right outside the downtown. And then, of course, you have one of the largest regional bus stations, terminals right within the downtown. I failed to mention, I just want to briefly say that there is a project also that is being proposed between the city, the county would be the lead, and New Jersey Transit to expand the regional bus station, the terminal, into a larger terminal, which would include public parking, workforce housing, and some county offices. So we believe that the location is paramount, but we also believe that the fact that it's the county seat, it has the 2 largest employers in the county, and the hospital and the administration offices. And then the idea that when we have started this process, although it sounds like there is a tremendous amount of units that are online and coming online, there's been a staggered approach both from the standpoint of when projects will be opening and then what types of units will be made available. So not all of the units are the same, not all of the projects are the same in terms of their price points, in terms of their amenities, in terms of their unit sizes. So we believe that if you put all of these things together, Hackensack's location, the need for housing, the fact that we're in kind of the second tier market, and its proximity to all of these transportation networks really gives Hackensack a great opportunity to have success.
Excellent answer, Fran. Follow up with, what do you see as difference in the applications for development from 10, 9, 5 years ago to what you're seeing today across your desk?
Yeah, so it actually probably started a little bit earlier than that, maybe 15 to 20 years ago. There was this if you look at it from a demographic standpoint, there are 80 million millennials, there's 8,000 individuals turning 65 every day. You have empty nester population. So there's really been a change in how people want to live and how people want to work and how they are engaged in their environment. And so those 2 demographics really start to run how and have a great influence on how residential is being designed and built, which has been changing over the last 10 to 15 years. And what I'll say is that in general, units have become smaller. The common spaces, amenity spaces within the buildings have increased in size and in number. So we've seen that kind of change, and I think it has a lot to do with the demographic and the people that are looking to move into these types of what I'll call urban-ish type of environments, which I believe Hackensack is, although it's a suburb, it's really much more of an urban kind of environment. So the more interesting question I think will be is whether or not the current situation of COVID and the coronavirus will have any impact on that trend that is occurring over the last 10 to 15 years.
So Fran, you've answered 2 of my next questions, and I think you touched upon it. A little bit curious about apartment mix as studios, singles, doubles. I think you addressed that sizes are going down. I just want to circle back on that.
Yeah, so in terms of the unit mix, I mean, every developer is different. Some developers look at it and they want more parking, some want less parking, some want larger units, some want smaller units. But in general, what we've seen in Hackensack is that there has been a trend towards higher percentage of 1 bedrooms than you would find in a traditional suburban area. Again, that's more of a general answer in terms of some developers are, want more of a 50-50, but in general, we've seen an increase in the number of one bedrooms, an increase in the number of studios from a percentage standpoint for developers in Hackensack than maybe we've seen in some other suburban areas. And then just to get back a little bit to the COVID question, we have, we work both for municipalities, but we also do projects for residential developers. And we've seen that from the private side that developers really aren't taking a knee-jerk approach yet. They're really trying to determine how post-COVID will affect design of units. That being said, we are seeing that some developers are looking to put into units some work spaces, as opposed to 5 years ago, 3 years ago, where more people were looking for these kind of WeWork spaces within a residential project where you could have a shared office space. We're starting to see some developers ask us about, can we put some of those spaces directly into a unit to address what may be a kind of a change in how people use common space into the future. So that's that's an interesting thing that we're following and we're aware of. It really hasn't affected the designs that are coming to the table right now in Hackensack. It'll be interesting if those projects coming 6 months from now or a year from now show that same kind of trend. But we're following that, tracking it.
Great.
I'm not actually sure I answered your question, Mike, but I wanted to get back to the COVID part.
Excellent. And my last question is, how about any pushback from the schools based upon this number of the volume of units and how the towns, whether they're pushing back or whether they're receptive, and what's your take on that?
So this is a critical piece to every municipality, no matter where you live in the state of New Jersey. If you're trying to revitalize your municipality or your downtown, the effect that school-age kids will have on the school system is critical. So there's a lot of data that has been put forth. A recent study by Rutgers was kind of updated study from 2001, really works through and shows the number of school-age kids by residential housing type. And what we know from the data that's in those documents is that there's significantly less students that for these types of projects, these types of developments, than there are for other suburban type of projects. And I'll give you a couple of examples and numbers. In Hackensack, there's 2 projects. I'll combine them, about 450 residential units in those 2 projects. There's somewhere in the ballpark of 40 to 50 school-age kids that would be across all grades that are in those 2 projects that are constructed. Significantly lower numbers than what would be in a typical townhouse or single-family type of development. Having said that, when you have 4,000 residential units, what you find is that there will be an increase in the number of school-age kids. And what we look to is the city does a fiscal impact analysis on every development project that comes to the city. And we assess how many school-age kids will likely come out of that type of project based on the data. We run the financial numbers, so we make sure that the city is net positive in terms of its tax revenue that it's generating off of a project. Then will have an impact on schools and police and other services that are needed. So it's important that as you go through these revitalization efforts, that you're not doing it just from a planning standpoint, but you're doing it from a fiscal analysis as well. So we believe that the city is talking about expansion of its school systems, understands the importance of that, but these projects are actually creating such great amount of revenue generation that it far exceeds what the cost will be going into the future.
Yeah, Fran,
but I think that generally is the answer.
And Fran, in that vein, can we talk a little bit about the different types of, under the municipal land use law, what the difference is between rehabilitation zones and redevelopment zones? And I think it really ties in nicely with what we were just talking about fiscal impact and tax pilots.
Yeah, so the state of New Jersey has what they call a toolbox redevelopment toolbox. And that toolbox essentially gives municipalities the ability to be able to promote and attract redevelopment and revitalization. And so, as I mentioned, back in 2012, the city designated the 163 acres as an area in need of rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is a very low threshold to meet the requirements, the statutory requirements. Essentially says that if you have infrastructure that is over 50 years of age and in need of repair, you can designate an area for rehabilitation. Rehabilitation only allows for what's called a 5-year abatement, and the abatement would be on the improvement. So it's not on the whole project, it's only on the improvement. So in a place like Hackensack and other urban areas where the rent rates may not support redevelopment without some sort of what's called a pilot payment loop taxes, then projects would not occur. So a redevelopment designation, which is a higher threshold, it essentially represents there's 8 criteria. You have to meet one of those criteria. If you can be designated as an area in need of redevelopment, then the city has the ability to offer or consider up to a 30-year pilot. So we designated 163 acres back in 2012. We've done 30 individual redevelopment plans, with many of which are within the rehabilitation zone, in order for the city to support the idea of providing pilots, for which if they didn't, development would not have occurred because the rent rates don't support what would be the cost allocation for a developer to build a project. So the city has used all of its tools and used it wisely, in my opinion, because they've gone through the fiscal impact analysis, because they've looked at each individual project over time. So what was offered in 2012 as the first pilot is no longer offered today. The requirements and the financial impacts have become more restrictive and better for the city because of the fact now that we have rents and we have units on the ground, and so the city has been really responsible in making sure that it is looking at it from both a fiscal standpoint and also from a planning standpoint.
Yeah, which leads me, and I saw we had some questions coming in from the audience. We're going to have a Q&A session, shortly. But one of the things I wanted to touch on after talking about redevelopment zones, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017 created the opportunity zones. It's kind of interesting how Hackensack is a big beneficiary of opportunity zones, at least from designation perspective. In your opinion, Fran, any impact, or what do you think about opportunity zones as it relates to Hackensack?
I think the city of Hackensack has been very fortunate that one of the opportunity zones almost entirely lays over the downtown rehabilitation zone. That's not the case in all opportunity zones. So where the city in 2012 set its vision and its goal to revitalize its downtown, and they put in place a plan, when the opportunity zones came into effect, the overlay of it really allowed for the development community to take yet another advantage from a financial standpoint. So from the perspective of the city, the opportunity zones has been just one more kind of feather in the cap for, to attract developers, to say not only has the city, taken all of these steps from 2012 to look towards revitalization and redevelopment, but now the opportunity zones provides yet another advantage. So we believe that it just further places Hackensack on top of the list of where developers should be looking for redevelopment from a financial.
And Fran, where should developers be looking next, or where should Mike and I be looking next, really, in the city as it relates to modifying, expanding zones? Can you just touch on that a little bit? I know we're focused on the downtown Main Street rehabilitation zone and the multifamily construction, but it'd be nice to hear about what's going on around town.
It's interesting. In 2012, we chose to restrict the area where we designated it for rehabilitation, to between State Street and River Street, from the courthouse all the way up to Sears, because we wanted to focus development into the downtown. We wanted to make sure that the development community looked at an area large enough where individual property owners couldn't stop development, but not so large that that developers would cherry pick areas and not have this mass and scale that was necessary to have a successful downtown. And that plan has been implemented, and we believe that there are still wonderful opportunities within the Main Street. We believe that there are a few really significant projects that are necessary and important to the city from the city's perspective, and represent opportunities for the private development community as well. Having said that, the reexamination study that we have been working on and will be presented to the public at some point in the next few months really talks about where the next kind of area to focus around. I mentioned Essex Street train station, the innovative bio-life science technology zone that we're working on, which would in effect mirror the idea of the downtown, but along the Essex Street corridor, and within that kind of area going both north, south, and east, west. So we believe that that is a significant location for potential revitalization moving forward as a way to bring job growth and high technology to support the hospital and support all the residential units that are in process in the downtown. Obviously, we believe that there's also opportunities around the Anderson Street train station. We believe that this is maybe a little smaller scale and lower opportunities, but to revitalize that as a small neighborhood commercial core, we believe that there's some really good opportunities there. And then we believe from State Street going towards the hospital that there's opportunities for lower scale, maybe even for sale product over the next 10 years that would be a transition from some of the single family neighborhoods and from the hospital into the higher scale downtown. So we believe there's lots of wonderful opportunities for the development community, and the city is being proactive in its approach as they were in 2009 and 10. We believe they're doing that now for the next 10 years.
That's great. Final question, in the last 90 days, how has the city responded, particularly the boards? Have they kept, things in motion, if you will, as it relates to, shutting down City Hall and not being able to have, planning board meetings and Board of Adjustment meetings?
Yeah, so, what I'll say is that I think the city has moved in terms of how cities move at light speed. They put together a great team of people, not only the leadership standpoint, but the team that they have in place for redevelopment. They have the best of the best in terms of what I believe in terms of the zoning and the construction officials, and so they have been working hard to try to continue to move applications forward. There was a little bit of time at the very beginning where there was some delay, but they have been talking weekly. We've been on calls, bi-weekly and monthly, and trying to move projects forward and the process forward. So, from a delivery standpoint, I think the city has acted admirably and done a wonderful job continuing to allow the process to move forward.
That's fantastic. And Kristen, I don't know if you want to bring up, I have a slide I want to bring up showing kind of the intersection of Passaic and Main and River. And Fran, I echo your sentiments. I think, the last 90 days has been really challenging for everyone. We're all adapting, and I think there was a short period of time where things were pretty quiet from, the end of March, basically. But in Mike and I's experience, we kind of kept forging forward. We have, a couple of projects we're working on in downtown Hackensack. Right here, you see in the foreground is the YMCA 360 Main Street, great 1.3 acre parcel, brick building. You can see it right there. Had a lot of interest from the development community on this project. And then directly across the street from there is a single story building that we're under contract to sell, again, for multifamily development. And this is just, I really like this particular intersection here. I think it's just really great with the college, diagonally across from the YMCA, when you're talking about them expanding and adding their culinary program. So, we're really excited about what we're working on here and reimagining this crossroads of the city. Mike, do you want to just touch on your experience over on River Street?
I certainly would. Something of particular interest to me is the former record site. Interestingly enough, about 10 years ago, was on the team that pitched for the exclusive right to represent. And in that pitch and subsequently, we identified some buyers, and actually one of the partial owners was one of those initial people. So pleased to say that NEI James C. Hansen has been appointed exclusive leasing rep for the retail component, which will include 2 to 3 buildings for a total of 35,000 square feet of first-class retail space. And it's really exciting for me because in that initial pitch 10 years ago, I pitched to Mac, Jennifer, and Stephen Borg, and the Borg family has been a long time family friend of the Hansen family, and it's a really exciting project for actually John's going to be on the team and also Cam Silverstein. So I think it shows that our presence in Hackensack continues and will continue, and how we will deploy our efforts and assets and participate in the growth of Hackensack.
And Mike, I'd just like to add, there's a great kind of story about that particular property and the developer that's developing that particular property now, in that when they came to the table, and they've really been supportive of assisting the city in trying to get some public improvements, physical improvements, from stormwater drainage to access to the waterfront. So, we love the fact that we get to work with some developers that understand adding value to what the city's trying to accomplish, adds value to their particular project. But they have been particularly excellent in helping the city, working together with the city to come to some mutually beneficial improvements that maybe weren't part of the initial concept. And so I think it's really important that the fact that you guys have been involved is probably says a lot to why those things happen. But I thought it was worth noting that they've been an excellent partner in this process, and I think that's important to know that all developers are partners with the city, and the city wants to be a good partner back to those developers.
Thanks, Fran.
And Kristen, I think we have some questions, piling up. Why don't we shift gears for a moment and take a look at what we have in the Q&A queue?
Sure, we're at the 11:35 mark, so it looks like we have about 5-10 minutes for questions.
Fantastic. Let's see, we have here, Fran, what do you think about this one? Has the city met its COA requirements?
Yes, so it's interesting, and I'm not the COA planner, so I can give you a very, very broad background. It's my understanding that the city has approximately 111, I think, units that it's looking to implement. The city has been working diligently with 3 different development firms on the construction of 100% affordable projects in different locations within the city as a way to kind of meet those obligations. In addition, the city is considering a potential overlay for COA units as well. So it's something that we talk about and the city talks about all the time. It's something that is critical from the city's perspective. And so, so that, that's as broad as I could get in terms of an answer. It's something that's on the mind. We talk about it all the time, and the city is working, like I said, with 3 different developers trying to move those projects forward from 100% affordable projects.
Fantastic. And I just shifted over to the chat box, and we have actually several people are asking about affordable housing. So I hope that I don't want to double down on it, but let's see. Here's a good one. Will Hackensack consider a parking ratio below 1 to 1?
We went from RSIS back in 2012 to 1.25 for what we call a non-catalyst project, and 1 to 1 for a catalyst project. I think the city's been very proactive in its parking ratio assessment. Obviously, the less parking that you require in a project means the lower the cost for the project. I think the city will continue to review its requirements, both from a parking standpoint, but from other things as well. The amendment, the redevelopment plan for the rehabilitation plan has been amended, I believe, 6 or 7 times over the last 8 years in an attempt to meet changing needs of the development community. And so I believe that they're going to continue to consider those things, and amendments will continue to be written. And if we find that parking ratios in Hackensack, like other municipalities, need to go below 1, then I think the city will make those considerations as it has in the last 8 years.
Okay. Let's see.
John, did we talk about liquor license?
Oh yeah, we actually had someone email in prior to the program, was asking about the efforts about the shared liquor license along Main Street in the downtown area. There was some push in Trenton a few years ago. Whatever happened with that? What's the latest?
So the city was involved with Gordon Johnson and had worked with his staff on writing a bill. This was several years ago. The bill was actually voted upon in Assembly. I think it passed 56-14, but it had never come up to vote in the Senate, and it had I don't know the term, it was put on a desk or in a closet or wherever it was, but it never came up to vote. And so it is a critical piece to the revitalization of any municipality in the state of New Jersey. Liquor reform is absolutely critical and necessary for municipalities to be able to meet the state goals that the state plan has, which is to revitalize urban areas. And so the city continues, we continue to try to have conversations and dialogue and push the envelope with different options that we're putting forth to the state through the assemblyman and through congressmen. But what I'll say is that it is absolutely necessary, in my perspective, for the city to be able to truly meet and reach its potential as an 18 to 24-hour mixed-use urban environment with lots of restaurants and outdoor retail, dining and spill-out type of uses on the ground floor. So what I would encourage everybody who's on this call is to take up that cause and reach out to someone in terms of your assemblyman or congressman or whomever from a political standpoint, and continue to push the need to have liquor reform in the state of New Jersey, because without it, I just don't think we're ever going to meet our potential. We're going to reach the goals that we're all aspiring to in terms of revitalization for our communities.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I have I think, Kristen, what do we have time for? 2 more questions?
Yeah, I would say 1 or 2 more.
All right, so the first one, I have one I want to finish on, but let me give you this one first. It's regarding stormwater management rules from the state level. Are you seeing any redevelopment plan or development plans in the city right now that are being impacted by the new stormwater management rules? And is green infrastructure, trying to be used, leveraged in rather than pushing it into the municipal infrastructure?
Yeah, so I believe that the city of Hackensack has been very proactive in this, all dating back to 2012. As a part of the rehabilitation plan, stormwater management requirements were put in for all developers that were above and beyond what the state mandate was at that time. The city has been incredibly proactive in this process of upgrading and understanding how to separate out the stormwater sewer lines in the city of Hackensack. A couple of years ago, they had a EIT grant of $3.9 million and separated out the combined system north of Passaic Street. They have been working on separating out the systems along Atlantic Street. It's been one of the delays to the two-way street conversion. They wanted to make sure that the stormwater separation had occurred on Main Street before they converted the street to two-way. The city is currently assessing its stormwater lines, basically will be west of the railroad going up the hill, and how that impacts going in down through and into the river, and that's part of what I mentioned with the record site developer being willing to team and work with the city on some of those improvements. So the city, and in the reexamination study, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be at minimum meeting the state requirement, the new state requirements as a part of the goals and objectives of from a sustainable standpoint. So, you know, to answer whether or not there's been green infrastructure, I think that for up till this point, the development community has been more concerned, in my opinion, about the rent rates and about the success of projects than necessarily about sustainability. I think the city has been proactive in its sustainability approach. I think that the next 10 years, the city will continue to revamp up the need for more stringent, sustainable practices in development projects.
That's great. And I guess let's end on this note. This is a good one. And I'd like to get both of your perspectives on this, or I'll weigh in on it too. What are the biggest challenges on the horizon for Hackensack as it looks forward to the next 10 years? So I think the critical piece from my perspective is you have a lot of residential units being constructed, a lot in process. And it's really important that the city understand how to capture from an entertainment standpoint, from a retail standpoint, from a restaurant standpoint, how to match that level of success in their retail, in their restaurants, and in their entertainment within and around the downtown. I think that we will not have been successful if we simply are able to put all these residential units in, and then on Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night, people are driving down to Jersey City or Hoboken or wherever to find their entertainment. So I think part of the city's part of what they need to really have some focus on and figure out how to be successful in is how to bring about the right type of retail mix, and restaurant mix into the downtown and support that so that the people that are living in downtown and are living on the hill and in the surrounding neighborhoods and towns want to look at Hackensack as the type of place you want to go and be a part of, from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. weekdays, and then even later on weekends. So I think that is a big part of where the city needs to kind of make sure it's focused on into the future. That's fantastic.
I just want to end on one thing. I don't want to cut you off, but I want to. The city's been very proactive, and we've talked about for the last 45 minutes. And I think that the city has put in place, and the leadership has been excellent to put in place a plan that, to everyone's maybe amazement, has been incredibly successful. I know for a number of the first few years of this plan, and even the first couple of projects, most people doubted that Hackensack would be able to have this resurgence that I believe everybody now acknowledges is happening and will happen. And they've been diligent about the entire process from the municipal side. But none of this happens without the hard work of the real estate community, of companies like NI Hansen, of individuals like you and Michael, in terms of actually getting things to occur, to bringing the development community to the city of Hackensack, just selling the city of Hackensack and what they're trying to do to the development community and to the real estate community. So, without all the hard work that you've done and Michael's done and your company has done over the last 8 years, none of this really gets off the ground in the manner that it has. So, from my perspective, it's a big shout out. Thank you for all the hard work that you've done. The city gets put in front, and they should, and they've been the leaders of it. But the background work is what makes all of these projects happen and all of these things, come out of the ground.
Fran,
you're too
amazing.
kind.
Yeah, you're amazing. I can see we're almost working up to a group hug here. But as we do our wrap up, I'd like to say that activity at NEI JMC Hansen is strong. We are very close to our pre-COVID activity numbers. Our office closed on March 17 and reopened to a partial opening on June 1st. we're seeing very strong activity across all sectors. So we're really pleased. We're lucky to be working at a great company. Secondly, Fran, you never disappoint. You're truly the star of this event, and we look forward to seeing you in the next event. Then the thank yous to Kristen. Kristen, you're the best. You work tirelessly, put many hours to make this happen, and I think the work product speaks for itself. Thank you very much. And also I'd like to thank Bill Hansen for his vision and support of an event like this. Is typical of what the ownership does at James E. Hansen. And thank you for making this possible. We look forward to hosting future programs on Hackensack. We'd like the audience to stay on. We have an incredible drone video that I think will give you enthusiasm and realize that Hackensack truly is the city of the future. And I'd like to thank our multi-housing team member, Cam Silverstein, who did the drone video, which we saved it for last. Not as good as Fran, but it's a close second. So thank you very much, everybody, and stick around for the drone video. You can email us anything we may have not addressed. We'll reach out to you, and have a great day and stay safe.